Do women have to be naked to get into the Met Museum? This question was blazoned across New York City buses in 1989. And if the question seems provocative, the accompanying image is even more so. The poster for the Guerrilla Girls shows the female nude from the painting Grand Odalisque by Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, one of the most famous works in the history of art. But instead of the angelic face of a concubine in the Sultan's harem, we see the head of a roaring gorilla. The woman's pose is discreet. She only shows her back and part of her breasts, but she's an objectified woman with a strong erotic charge. With this manifesto, Guerrilla Girls, a feminist art group, asks the world, what has happened to women in museums? Why, when they appear, do they do so to enslave the male gaze and curiosity in the mythological guise of a Greek goddess? Here, the gorilla mask takes on an even more powerful, subversive charge because of the symbol of virility and domination to which it refers. The link to King Kong is obvious. The Guerrilla Girls intended to break with gender stereotypes once and for all and propose a sexy warrior woman. It was also the Guerrilla Girls who carried out what they call weenie counts, penis counts, that is, to compare the number of male and female nudes in works exhibited in museums. The Guerrilla Girls group was formed in New York following outrage at a 1984 exhibition at MoMA. The museum offered an overview of the art of the period. Too bad that of the 169 artists exhibited, only 13 were women. So, let's look at a quote by Sir Rowland Penrose, an English surrealist painter, and try to reflect on the role of women in the history of Western art. Penrose was talking to the legendary feminist Whitney Chadwick when he says, well, of course women were important, but because they were our muses. They weren't artists. Sometime later, Chadwick asked the painter Leonora Carrington what she thought of Penrose's idea of the surrealist muse, and she replied, I thought that was bullshit. I didn't have time to be anyone's muse. I was too busy rebelling against my family and learning how to be an artist. Being a woman is complicated. Simone de Beauvoir herself says, women are made, not born. It is almost impossible to be a woman and an artist at the same time. An artist and not a muse. An artist who creates and asserts herself by virtue of her art and not as wife of, lover of, inspiring muse of. Our collective memory contains the names of great painters, sculptors and architects, but hardly any female names have made their way into this male pantheon. Even in the 19th century, a woman had to have the name of a man, otherwise gallery owners would remove her name from paintings and put that of a male painter. However, although women play a marginal role in the history of art, they have always participated in art creation, defying prohibitions and prejudices. But how have they managed to get round the many obstacles and establish themselves? In the Renaissance, Italy and Flanders became the main art centres. There was a sea change in Italy. Painters, who had worked anonymously until then, fought to be recognised and to be able to put their signature on their works. As Leonardo da Vinci said, art is not only technique, but imagination and divine inspiration. Unfortunately, in the Western world, the divine was male. Women could not access it. There were exceptions, of course. You may have listened to my podcast about Artemisia Gentileschi, a 17th century Italian painter who became one of the most sought-after painters of her day. She was also the first woman to enter the Florentina Accademia di Disegno on the recommendation of Vasari himself, who was arguably the first art historian and wrote the classic art history textbook Lives of the Most Famous Artists, Sculptors and Architects. Decades before Artemisia, Sofonisba Anguissola, born in Cremona in 1532 in northern Italy, also managed to smash the glass ceiling. She knew that marriage and motherhood would stop her from achieving her goal, and she did not get married till later in life. I'm talking about the age of 40. after being recognized as the official painter of the Spanish court of King Philip. It was the king himself who helped her find a husband, a Sicilian nobleman from the town of Paternò, which, by the way, is where I grew up, and even paid her dowry as a token of his gratitude. She then moved to Sicily with her husband and continued to paint. Sofonisba developed a passion for painting when she was a child, though her father was a nobleman, not a painter. When she was a teenager, she went to Milan with her sister to train to be a painter with the painter Bernardino Campi. She was even encouraged by Michelangelo after she copied a drawing of his. Indeed, her own work was limited to copying works of other authors and the portrait genre, the only artistic fields that were acceptable for a young woman. Let us discuss the painting called Self-Portrait with Bernardino Campi, who was her maestro. It hangs in the Pinacoteca Nazionale di Siena and is a sophisticated painting within a painting, showing Bernardino Campi working on a portrait of the young Sofonisba. It is original, to say the least. The painter affirms herself as the subject of the portrait, while at the same time being the author of it. Sofonisba painted this inventive, playful work in her 20s, pushing the limits of the genre she was restricted to as a woman. In Lankut in Poland, we can see another example of Sofonisba breaking a taboo. There is a self-portrait of her in the process of painting the Madonna and Child. This echoes medieval portrayals of Saint Luke painting the Virgin and Child, which was a common devotional subject in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. Saint Luke was the patron saint of artists, and by placing herself in the same pose, Sofonisba declares to the world that she is an artist. Vasari himself did not doubt it, and she appears in the second edition of Vasari's Lives of Famous Artists. Her paintings can be seen in galleries all over the world, including a few in Italy. In Rome, you can see one of her paintings at the Galleria Doria Pamphili, called The Couple. The Museo Nazionale in Capodimonte, Naples, houses a self-portrait at a spinet, and another self-portrait is on display at the Uffizi. And the small Sicilian town of Paternò, where she lived for a while, has managed to hold on to one of the paintings she produced there, the Madonna dell'Itria. In this period, the female self-portrait became a distinctive trademark that characterized women artists and allowed them to express their sexual and social identity at the same time. Sofonisba Anguissola produced the longest series of self-portrait between Dürer, the first to develop this genre, and Rembrandt, who was to produce a great many of them. The female self-portrait can be seen as a political manifesto, an identity claim that questions the role of women in the 16th century society. However, a problem arises: the blank canvas. Women had no example on which to base the representation of themselves, other than that of the muses or virgins. It was Sofonisba Anguissola who first trod this path. She is credited with the idea of constructing an image of a virtuous maiden and artist. On the one hand, she embodies female moral principles, adhering to the strict dictates of the Counter-Reformation. On the other hand, she arouses curiosity as a cultured woman devoted to the arts, following a model that was becoming established in Italian courts. Another important female artist of the 16th century worth mentioning is Lavinia Fontana. Born in Bologna in 1552, she had the advantage that her father was a leading painter in the city. Sofonisba's influence can be seen in Lavinia's self-portrait at the spinet and self-portrait in the studio. She was actually married to a painter, Giovan Paolo Zappi. However, he ended up being her agent. Together they had 11 children, and Lavinia's husband took care of them while she painted. You can imagine how unusual this was in those days. Lavinia Fontana is often considered to be the first woman to have her own workshop, and was probably among the first women to paint nudes, like Minerva dressing and Venus and Mars. Her self-portraits enable us to understand what it meant to be a woman and an artist. They are not innocent reflections of what she sees when she looks in the mirror, but her artistic testament. Moving forward to the Age of Enlightenment, under Louis XIV, France became the center of culture and the art world, and women from wealthy classes experienced an era of emancipation. The Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture was founded, and artists were able to exhibit their works at the Salon du Louvre. In 1663, Louis XIV, a great art lover, opened the doors to all talented artists without distinction of sex. However, despite the large number of female candidates, only 4 women were chosen. In this context, the art of Rosalba Carriera emerges. She was born in Venice in 1673, and she was one of the first artists to be born into a middle-class family. Her mother was a lace maker and her father a civil servant, and she spent her youth drawing and designing lace. She began to earn a living by painting miniature portraits on ivory for tobacco shop interiors, but her international clientele grew rapidly. She experimented by using pastel pencils for her portraits. It was an unusual technique that represents an artistic revolution, catapulting pastel into the realm of fine art. This enabled her to achieve a luminous appearance of the face in her portraits. The brilliant colors and variations in the grain could help produce vaporous hairstyles and tiny lace details. It was suddenly clear that compared to oil paints, the complexion could be depicted in a much more realistic way with pastels. This technique, which is comparable to today's photographic retouching, caused a sensation. Within 18 months, Rosalba produced more than 30 portraits, including one of the future Louis XV at the age of 15. Her fame was such that in 1720, the artists of the Academy felt obliged to accept her, and she became the 5th woman to be admitted. Progress was on the way, but as it happens still today, to make it through, women can't just be good, they need to be exceptional. However, with the French Revolution, things changed, and you wouldn't expect this. While men gained more freedom, women lost it, as the patriarchal mentality re-emerged. In 1804, Napoleon established the legal incapacity of women. Ruskin and Rousseau, among the most acclaimed intellectuals of the time, denigrated the creative and intellectual capacity of women. According to Ruskin, for example, man's power is active, progressive, defensive. He is the maker, the creator, the discoverer. The woman's mind, he stated, is not fit to discover or to create. Women realized that they could not marry if they wanted to establish themselves as artists. This produced radical personalities, such as the French woman Rosa Bonheur, a transgressive figure capable of breaking taboos and subverting traditional codes. She publicly affirmed her homosexuality and was the first artist to purposely adopt masculine attitudes such as smoking and wearing trousers. Only at the end of the 19th century did things start to change, and a new type of female self-portrait appeared. Female artists began to deal with themes such as pregnancy and sexuality. The 20th century was also the century of the death of figurative painting. There was a different take on representation, with art movements such as Cubism, Duchamp's ready-made, and Dada, for example. In the painting group of artists of 1908, Frenchwoman Marie Laurencin paints herself together with Picasso, Apollinaire, and Fernand Olivier. It is the first painting in which a female artist proclaims her equality with her male painter and writer colleagues. Looking at the painting, we see that she has subtly distinguished herself from the others, sitting further down and holding a rose. This is a very powerful strategy, in which the artist asserts her creative independence. The self-portrait of a painter in the company of a nude model was one of the favorite themes of male artists in the second half of the 19th century. Charlotte Baron-Corinth, a Berlin artist, subverted the codes when she proposed the canvas Self-Portrait with Model in 1931. It is a work that is shocking in its provocative scope. The artist portrays herself seated, brush in one hand, looking defiantly at us, while behind her we see the model. She's standing naked, partly seeming to look at us, partly seeming to observe the work Charlotte is painting. In 1928, Lottie Laserstein, a Dutch artist, painted the marvelous work In My Studio, in which we see her intent on painting, colour palette in her hand, while on the bed in front of her lies the naked body of a model. The genius of this image stems from the absence of any subtext of sexuality that traditionally clings to paintings of artists and model. In this context of redefining the role of women and self-representation, one of the most brilliant figures is, of course, Frida Kahlo, who integrated female pain, both physical and psychological, into her work. The representation of the suffering artist appears from the very beginning, with a melancholic juror or a Goya surviving a life-threatening illness. Frida, however, takes pain to extremes, as shown in the famous painting The Broken Column, painted in 1944, in which a metal bust joins the two parts of the body, pierced by a series of nails. So we can see a deepening of the psychological, intimate dimension on the part of women, and the taking over of the codes of male painting. In the 1980 work, Nude Self-Portrait, the American Alice Neel is no longer afraid of old age and represents herself naked, with a paintbrush, sitting on an armchair, her hair white, her face wrinkled, and her body flaccid. British artist Sarah Lucas in turn plays with the standardized media image of women. Photographic self-portraits are an important part of her production. In one of them, one of my favorite pictures, she's sitting in an armchair looking at us. She is dressed normally, and there would be nothing special about her, if it were not for the two fried eggs on her chest that catch our attention. Through Lucas's use of food and cigarettes as accessories of rebellion or phallic references, the artist presents an identity that challenges stereotypical representations of gender and sexuality. I will end this panorama of women who have forged their own, highly original artistic mark with the American artist Sylvia Slay. Remember the poster of the Guerrilla Girls at the beginning of the episode, with their distortion of the painting Grand Odalisque by Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres? In Sylvia Slay's 1972 painting, called The Turkish Bath, she takes up another of Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres's famous works, showing a bunch of nude concubines in a Turkish bath in a harem. Instead of the nude female bathers in the French painter's work, Sylvia Slay depicts 6 naked men in the same position, sensual and distracted, in an American 1970s setting. In this painting, the artist appropriates the male body and treats it as a muse, in the way that male painters have treated the female body for centuries. In this way, she reverses the roles and manages to express all the challenges of being and asserting oneself as a female artist. Wow, what a long journey through the evolution and revolution of these female artists. And this last painting we talked about, The Turkish Bath by Sylvia Slay, it's really the evidence of all the sacrifices, all the work, what we went through to get where we are today. And it gives me such a relief that women can be artists and we can see them in museums and in the galleries today without thinking, wow, that's an achievement, you know? It's simply normal that there are female artists in museums. I know female artists still have battles to fight, but still it's nice to think of all of the achievements, and I hope it gives you as well relief and satisfaction. And that's it. As always, you can have a look at the Instagram page, Roberta Jones Podcast. There you can also have a look at the paintings that we talk about in the episodes. And you can also follow and download the episodes and like and spread the word. That would really help. Thank you so much to my collaborators, without which this could not be possible. Thank you, Christabel Anderson, for the editing. Paulina Spiegovic for the writing and research, Catherine Ruth Halstead for the translation and editing, and Matteo D'Alessandro for music and sound effects. Alright, time travelers, stay tuned for the next exciting episode, and until next time.